Morning, Janice.
Good morning.
Today we're going to talk about where to save your money first. So, even if you're ready to be responsible and start saving, I get it. It can be very confusing. So, like, where do you start? What's more important than the other? Should I do my 401k first or my IRA if I don't have enough money to do both? So, today we're going to go over the answers in terms of what your priority should be and where you should save first. Sound good?
Sounds very good.
All right. So let's start by saying that your first priority, the first bucket you should be filling, should be retirement, and that means your 401k, your IRAs, and so forth. I'm going to kind of assume that everyone listening is familiar with what those things are. If not, we'll have other episodes maybe to dive a little deeper into those. But for now, I'm going to assume you just kind of understand that the 401k is your workplace savings account ish, yeah, and your IRA is your sort of individual. That's what IRA stands for, individual retirement account. Yeah, that you do on your own. Does that sound like a fair set of assumptions?
That sounds very good.
Okay. So here's the order in which you put your savings into your retirement accounts. So, number one, you max out your 401k up to the free money limit. Everyone loves free money, right?
Oh, yes. Free money is really good. I do wish it would grow on trees, but I haven't found one.
So here's what I mean by that. Many employers will give you a free match of up to a certain amount that you save through your 401k. And the most typical setup is your company, your employer, will match 100% dollar for dollar up to the first 6% of your annual salary, right? So let's just run through an example to make sure that makes sense. So let's say you're making 40,000 a year, yeah? And 6% of that is annualized is $2,400. So if you set it up so that $2,400 is, I guess, automatically withdrawn from your paycheck and automatically deposited into your 401k, and guess what? Guess what happens next, Janice?
Oh, it just compiles, and it's quite a
Well,
bit.
before that,
You don't think
before
it's that
that,
much, but
before that, your
oh,
employer
before that,
matches.
I'm getting excited. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm like, wait, that's money. It's fabulous.
So if you withhold 2,400 from your paycheck, your employer matches and puts an additional $2,400, dollar for dollar, into your 401k account. So that year, you you put in $2,400, but at the end of the year you have $4,800. You doubled your money just because you used the account up to the free money limit.
See, now I'm even more excited. Even more money. I shouldn't have skipped ahead. No, but that's you should definitely take advantage of that if you have it.
And I mean, just using that free match, not even your money, but if you just use the free match portion of the money, compounding over the course of a typical 35-year career, would be $400,000 by the time you retire. $400,000 of free money for your retirement. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that's why the first thing you do if this type of 401k is available in your family finances, that is the first place you put your money. You max out the free money limit of your 401k. Not because the 401k is necessarily the best way of saving, because there are cons that we'll talk about in a bit, but because you get free money for doing it.
Right. And free money is really good. And most of this comes out of your paycheck. So it's not like you realize that it's there. And I mean, if you break it down, it's not an incredible amount in one paycheck. So it just kind of happens. And it's not like you're taking money out of your actual bank account. You're going somewhere else to put it in. It happens, which makes it even easier.
Exactly. I mean, they do their best to make it as painless and as make it a habit for you, so you don't even think about it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So then next, okay, you've maxed out your free money on the 401k. Now you're going to kind of switch gears a little bit, and this is sort of the ideal scenario. I know it's not always going to be the case for everyone, but we're just going to lay out the groundwork for the ideal saving scenario. Next, you're going to max out your IRA or your Roth IRA. All right. So you're probably wondering, why am I switching from 401k to Roth or to an IRA after the free money limit? Why don't I just keep contributing to my 401k, which I'll talk about in a second? The reason this is so important, or the reason why you want to prioritize your IRA over your non-free money 401k, is because 401ks have a lot of strings attached and are a lot more limiting than an IRA. What are a couple of examples of that? Your your 401k will have a more usually, not always, but usually have a much more limited of investing options. So what happens is your employer sets up an IRA, a 401k for all their employees, and they when they set it up, you're given a menu. It's like what do you call that thing in the fancy restaurants where you only choose 3 things? The Prixie Fixie, the Price
Oh
Fix?
yeah. Yes. Yeah, Prixie Fixie. I'm sure there's a fancy way to say it, but yes, those restaurants.
So that's your 401k. I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but you are, limited to those menu options, right? Some other strings that might apply. Sometimes the 401k match or the 401k funds have vesting rules, meaning you have to stay with the employer for a certain amount of time before you can do this or that. So there's just a couple of more strings and a couple of more limitations on 401ks. And for that reason, once you've gotten your free money, shift the rest of your money to your IRA or Roth IRA, because an IRA or Roth IRA, you can pretty much invest in anything. You could literally, if you wanted to buy, I'm not recommending this. Please be clear, I'm not recommending this, but you could buy cryptocurrency. You could buy investment real estate. You could buy art. You could buy anything and have it in a type of IRA. Those are called self-directed IRAs. Let's not go too far on a tangent. But my point is, like, the sky's the limit. You can invest in anything with your IRA. And that's why you want to make this shift from free money 401k next IRAs. Make sense so far, Janice? Any questions?
No, it does make sense. The IRA is it's limited to your knowledge of the subject, whereas the 401k is limited to the parameters put on by your employer.
Very good. So then IRAs have their limits too, currently $5,500 per year. So once you've maxed out your free money 401k contribution, then you've switched over to IRA and maxed that out. Then and only then do you go back to the 401k and max out whatever remaining non-free money limit you have left to contribute. And that is going to differ because I think you lose some of your contribution ability based on how much you put into your IRA. Check with your tax advisor for this. But make sure you don't over contribute because there's penalty involved with that. So are we on the same page so far? Number one priority, first step is retirement accounts, starting with your free money 401k, then switching to IRA or Roth IRA, and then switching back to non-free money 401k. Kind of complicated, but I'm trying to give you like the best optimal way of doing it. That make sound good so far?
It does, especially if the end result is going to be more money in your retirement. Going through these little extra steps is going to be worth it.
And then if you're very confident you're going to max out everything, it's much easier. You don't have to do this hopping back and forth. You just know you're going to max out your 401k and your IRA, which is probably the best way to go anyway. All right. So then your second priority after maxing out your retirement contributions is setting up an emergency fund. All right. What do you think, Janice? What's your sort of common sense idea of how much you should have in an emergency or rainy day fund?
So I know the importance of an emergency fund. Something happens and you need to get money quickly. But it's a good rule of thumb, I believe, to have 6 months worth of expenses set aside for that rainy day. If you do the math, it can be a lot, but it's important because what if one thing happens? 6 months isn't going to get you that far.
Yeah. I mean, you really need to think of it as 6 months. Where that number comes from is if you lose your job, if you lose your income, I mean, that's about how long do you think it'll take you to get most people? How long do you think it'll take most people to find a new job to replace their income, right?
I would safely say a few months to get back in the game. Yeah, it definitely takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. So this is basically unemployment. What do you call it? Bridge money, right?
Yes.
I guess you also have unemployment benefits, but you don't want to rely on that. That's probably not enough to support your family, right?
So because you never know how it'll end or what'll happen at the end. Exactly.
Right. So 6 months should conservatively cover you between when you are unexpectedly lose your job, right, to when you get back on your feet, as it were. Yeah.
Yes.
So for that reason, because this is emergency money, this should be in highly liquid funds, accounts. And what I mean by that is it should be a savings account. I'm just going to be blunt. It should be in an online savings account, even though that's going to pay you a pittance of maybe 1 or 2% a year, right?
Right.
If
but you can get to it.
Exactly, exactly. So, for example, if some bank is offering you a CD or a certificate of deposit, a lot of folks might not know what that is. That's a type of savings account where you are committing to keep the money in the account for 9 months, a year, 15 months, whatever. But you get a slightly higher interest rate. You might get 2.2%. Not worth it for this scenario. You need that money to be accessible because if you take the money out of a CD early, you get hit with a penalty, right?
Right. And if you need the money before 9 or 15 months, what do? You lose the money, like you said, in penalties and interest, or you have a savings account that you could draw off of in seconds. I don't know how you are, but I could go to the ATM and get money out of the savings account.
Exactly. So some might be thinking, oh, well, this whole unemployment safety net that you're talking about sounds super scary. Why not do more than 6 months? The reason you don't do more than 6 months is because, like we just talked about, you're going to have this in super liquid, low interest online savings account, which is basically, you're probably even losing money to inflation, to cost of living. So you don't want to overfund this. You want as much money as possible, growing your wealth in your retirement or other savings account or investment accounts. This is literally the modern version of the cash you put in your mattress. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is your what do they call that in those gangster movies? Your getaway bag.
Yes. Yes. Your getaway bag.
Right.
That's
So you don't want to have too much in there. You don't want all your wealth tied up in there, but you need just enough for that emergency situation, right?
right. And the key being that you can get to it. You can get to it quickly if there's a problem, or you just it's right there.
Very good. Moving on. Okay, so you've maxed out your retirement accounts and you now have a solid emergency fund that's readily accessible. Step 3, dump everything else into non-qualified, meaning, not IRAs and not 401ks. Just dump them into index funds, low-cost index funds. Janice, do you know what's the difference between an index fund and a mutual fund?
So I'm waiting for your definition of that. So in your explanation.
All right, sure. Both are baskets of many, many stocks, as opposed to sort of throwing darts at a dartboard and trying to pick the right stock. You're owning a broad spectrum of many, many, many stocks. But the difference between an index fund and a mutual fund is that an index fund has extremely low fees or management fees because it's basically it's sort of mathematically or algorithmically set up. It's going to automatically mirror the top 500 companies in the United States, or the top 100 by size, or the top 1,000 mid-market. So there's no stock picker or portfolio manager, or there's no person earning a fee for picking the stocks that go into that index fund. And for that reason, the cost of an index fund will be like a tenth of what you would pay even on a mutual fund. So for that reason, index funds are basically every smart person out there who has no conflicting interest will tell you to invest in low cost index funds. And the big name is the kindly old rich grandfatherly figure, Warren Buffett. Yes. I mean, he's not selling us anything, so he does have that credibility. He's not selling us at least financial advice. And he says if you had invested $10,000 in the S&P in 1942, S&P is a common index. How much do you think you would have today? If you invested $10,000 in the S&P in 1942, what amount do you think you'd have today, Janice, based on compounding?
So interesting. I know the answer that you're going to give, but it is astounding. But I wouldn't have thought it was that much. Like you said, you put a little bit of money away, and then what happens? How many years later?
So the answer, if you're looking on screen with us, is $51 million for $10,000 invested about 60 years or 80 years ago. So basically, the bottom line, I mean, I don't want to over-explain this. We can do this in other episodes. But Mark Cuban, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, they all say the same thing, low-cost index funds, because most people can't beat the market, so just be the market, right?
That makes sense.
And the market is awesome. The American stock market is an engine of growth. Why not just be part of it and instead of trying to shave and sneak through and get a little bit more? Don't be greedy. Just be happy to be as successful as America. Come on, that's pretty good.
That's really good advice. That's almost like a good one-liner. Be America.
You know what? Be as rich as. I don't know. We'll work on that.
We'll rewind and we'll listen to it.
Okay, so but I'm sure you're earning. Okay, fine. Dump all my money in index funds after after retirement and savings, what about other stuff? What about buying a house or saving for a wedding or saving for a big vacation? And my take on this is, you can do all those things from your index funds. Look, if you have the majority of your wealth after retirement and say emergency is squared away, you're starting your own growth engine, right? And yes, you can withdraw from that to buy your house or to, pay for your kid's wedding or spend on a big vacation. You don't need a separate account for that. If you did, it's going to grow at 2% like the emergency fund, which is
right.
Not so great. So my advice is just grow your general wealth as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and kind of everything else will take care of itself, right? I mean, if you have enough money, those things you don't need separate accounts for. You'll just draw it from your general wealth. Does that make sense?
Yes. And also what you said so far, they don't seem very risky. It's not like you're putting what you said in the Bitcoin or, they're very solid ways that you can grow your money for retirement.
Yeah. And the shame of it all is that, and we'll go into this in another episode, that folks don't do this because we are totally oversold and persuaded to do other things that are not really in our best interest and that really, really take a huge chunk out of our retirement and our savings. I'm working on a book on that, on how to save properly, but I'll hop off my soapbox for now. We'll do that another time.
I'm looking forward to it because I do think that the problem is education. When you see all this online and you don't know what's true and fact and fiction, so it would be nice to see that information on what's the smart way to grow your money.
So one other element, we did talk briefly about home ownership and, what about saving for a house? Let's talk about home ownership in general and where that fits into your retirement plan or pie or whatever it is. The bottom line is, okay, look, if you believe in home ownership, and I'm not saying you necessarily have to, I think renting is a totally logical option for many parts of the country. But if you believe in home ownership, just keep in mind how home ownership will fit into your total plan. Because if your plan is to own your home or own a home, maybe not this one, but a future iteration, by the time you retire, that will probably mean that your housing cost upon retirement will be a lot less, hopefully, if you bought not a dump, right?
Right.
so then you don't have to save as much to, your retirement budget won't have to contemplate as much housing cost. Does that make sense?
It does. And we set it up that way in our family when we purchased our house. We knew that this was going to be a portion of our retirement, whether that's going to be the equity in it or how we live later, whether that's smaller, the same place, and now our mortgage is down. So our house is factored into our plan, our big picture.
Totally makes sense. And it's kind of like a forced savings device, just like you were talking about earlier about how the 401k kind of get automatically deducted. Paying down your mortgage is kind of like an automatic savings. You're contributing to your retirement while you're doing that. So it's almost killing two birds with one stone, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? We know that we have this every month that you have to pay, and you realize that, it might hurt a little bit, but the end result is every time you look at that balance, it's going down and the market's going up. So it works. It works for us. It might not work for everyone, but it's definitely part of our plan, and we enjoy it.
All right, and the last chip I want to throw into the pot is college. People often ask, okay, yeah, fine, but where does saving for juniors college fit into all this? This is unequivocal. Prioritize saving for your own retirement before your kids' college. Make sure your retirement is rock solid before your kids' college. Why do you think that is, Janice? First of all, do you agree with that?
I do. In talking to you over the year, it definitely makes sense. Because, at some point you don't know that college could become free. There's a lot of loans out there. They could get a full ride educational scholarship. But if you're not set up for retirement, where does that leave you in the end? With their student loans, and it seems to make sense that you are set up and you're solid financial, and then you can look at the college.
Yeah, you covered all the great points. There's scholarships, tuition, or student loans, grants for school. I have not yet come across a grant to retire or a scholarship to retire.
When you find that, please let us know.
Seriously. It's basically on you, right? Your kid has other options. Your retirement is on you and maybe some Social Security, right?
Exactly. Yep, yeah. Exactly.
So for that reason, just make sure your retirement is squared away. You being a financial burden on your kid with an Ivy League education, I mean, is that a net positive, or is it better if your kid, somehow got his college education with loans, but he doesn't have to support you in your old age,
exactly,
right?
Or you run the risk of you have this great college planned and they don't go to college. I mean, there are so many factors but you are going to retire. I mean, that's just the reality of it. That's a definite. I can tell you with certainty it is a goal of mine.
Yeah. So I think that covers the sort of checklist or the depth chart of how you should do this. Remember, retirement first, emergency next, then dump everything else into index funds. And yeah, if you want to wrap into home ownership into that, definitely take a look at that. College savings, way at the bottom. Tell me if you agree or disagree, by the way. I'm totally open to hearing competing thoughts. I might argue back at you, but let's have that conversation.
Yes. And quick question.
Sure.
Is when you're planning all of this and you're doing all of this, do you suggest to talk to somebody that's a professional, like a professional advisor? Because like we said earlier, everything's available online. You can go on, you could Google it, but it seems like something like this would maybe be beneficial to sit down and talk to somebody if you have ideas and reservations or not know what to do. What do you think about that?
This one's a dicey area because the incentives are kind of all over the place in this particular field, personal finance and financial advice. If you really feel like you're lost and you need advice, and one recommendation I would give is to seek fee-based advice, meaning, hey, Mr. John Moneyman, I will pay you $500 to sit down with me and my wife over the course of 2 meetings and really just develop a plan, and that's it. That is our financial relationship. You're not telling me which stocks to pick. That's conflict of interest. You're not taking 1% of my money for the next 20 years, conflict of interest. You're not, just get rid of all those other conflicts and just pay him for independent advice. Even that, there's a few problems, but it's the closest you can get if you need to sit down with somebody.
Interesting. No, thank you. I appreciate that because sometimes people don't know where to turn in the best way to do that.
That's a great question. And maybe we'll do a whole thing on all the conflicts that are out there. And then all my friends who are FAs can hate me. So we'll do that.
Yes. And I would be looking forward to the comments on that one. That would be very interesting.
Okay. So let's wrap this one up, Janice. Thank you very much. I hope everyone found this helpful. And yes, I'm totally open to hearing listeners, counter arguments. Let's do it. Let's mix it up. All right. Thanks for listening. Janice, thank you and talk to you later.
Talk soon.
Bye now.